Welcome back to Wings of Bibles. I'm Dustin, and today my plan was to cover part 68, which is basic med, but I decided let's go ahead and jump into part 830 as well. So starting off here, part 68, requirements for operating certain small aircraft without a medical certificate. 61.8, applicability. This part prescribes the medical education and examination requirements for operating an aircraft under 61.113 of this chapter without holding a medical certificate issued under Part 67 of this chapter. 68.3, medical education course requirements. So these are the requirements for the medical education course. The medical education course required to act as pilot in command or serve as a required flight crew member in an operation under 61.113 of this chapter must. This is what is required in that medical education course. It must educate pilots on conducting medical self-assessments, advise pilots on identifying warning signs of potential serious medical conditions, identify risk mitigation strategies for medical conditions, increase awareness of the impacts of potentially impairing over-the-counter and prescription drug medications, encourage regular medical examinations and consultations with primary care physicians, inform pilots of the regulations pertaining to the prohibition on operations during medical deficiency and medically disqualifying conditions, and provide the checklist developed by the FAA in accordance with 68.7. Upon successful completion of the medical education course, the following items must be electronically provided to the individual seeking to act as pilot in command or serve as a required flight crew member under the conditions and limitations of 61.113I of this chapter and transmitted to the FAA. So after you complete that medical education course, you'll be sent a form, and on that form will be these things, and it has to be submitted to the FAA. So, a certification of completion of the medical education course, which shall be retained in the individual's logbook and made available upon request, and shall contain the individual's name, address, and airman certificate number. A release authorizing single access to the national driver registration through a designated state department of motor vehicles to furnish to the FAA information pertaining to the individual's driving record. A certification by the individual that the individual is under the care and treatment of a physician if the individual has been diagnosed with any medical condition that may impact the ability of the individual to fly as required under 6123C3 of this chapter. A form that includes the name, address, telephone number, and airman certificate number of the individual, the name, address, telephone number, and state medical license number of the physician performing the comprehensive medical examination, the date of the comprehensive medical examination, and a certification by the individual that the checklist described in 68.7 was followed and signed by the physician during the medical examination required by this section, and a statement which shall be signed by the individual certifying that the individual understands the existing prohibition on operations during medical deficiency, stating, I understand that I cannot act as pilot in command of any other capacity as a required flight crew member if I know or have reason to know of any medical condition that would make me unable to operate the aircraft in a safe manner. So in addition to completing your medical education course, you also have to complete a comprehensive medical examination, Part 68.5. Prior to the medical examination required by 6123 of this chapter, an individual must, so this is what you have to do before the medical examination. You must complete the individual section of the checklist described in 68.7 and provide the completed checklist to the state licensed physician performing the medical examination. Now, this is what the physician has to do. They have to conduct the medical examination in accordance with the checklist set forth in 68.7, which we're going to get into in the next section. check each item specified during the examination, and address as medically appropriate every medical condition listed and any medications the individual is taking. Part 68.7, which is Comprehensive Medical Examination Checklist. So this is what is covered in the examination checklist. The comprehensive medical examination required to conduct operations under 61-113I must include a checklist containing the following. So in that examination checklist, there has to be a section for the individual to complete that contains boxes 3 through 13 and boxes 16 through 19 of the FAA Form 8508, 3 through 99, or any successor form, and a signature line for the individual to affirm that the answers provided by the individual on that checklist, including the individual's answers regarding medical history, are true and complete. The individual understands that he or she is prohibited under FAA regulations from acting as pilot in command or any other capacity as a required flight crew member if he or she knows or has reason to know of any medical deficiency or medically disqualifying condition that would make the individual unable to operate the aircraft in a safe manner, and the individual is aware of the regulations pertaining to the prohibition on operations during medical deficiency and has no medically disqualifying conditions in accordance with applicable law. Now, this is what the physician is looking for during the examination. This is the physician's checklist. A section with instructions for the individual to provide the completed checklist to the state licensed physician performing the comprehensive medical examination required under 68.5, and a section for the physician to complete that instructs the physician to perform a clinical examination of. Now, I'm not going to read through all this, but you can just glance through that and you'll see that it's literally everything. Anything and everything that a physician could check, they ask you to check, okay? And in addition to these things, the physician can, in his or her medical judgment, they can check anything else the physician, in his or her medical judgment, considers necessary. So in addition to these, the physician can check anything they want that they consider necessary. To exercise medical discretion to address as medically appropriate any medical conditions identified and to exercise medical discretion in determining whether any medical tests are warranted as part of the comprehensive medical examination. So this section is saying the physician can use their discretion to determine if more tests are needed for the comprehensive medical examination. They also have to discuss all drugs the individual reports taking, prescription and non-prescription, and their potential to interfere with the safe operation of an aircraft or motor vehicle. They have to sign the checklist stating, "I certify that I discussed all items on this checklist with the individual during my examination, discussed any medications the individual is taking that could interfere with his or her ability to safely operate an aircraft or motor vehicle, and performed an examination that included all of the items on this checklist. I certify that I am not aware of any medical condition that, as presently treated, could interfere with the individual's ability to safely operate an aircraft," and to provide the date the comprehensive medical examination was completed and the physician's full name, address, telephone number, and state medical license number. Part 68.9, Special Issuance Process. General. An individual who has met the qualifications to operate an aircraft under 61-113 of this chapter. Let's just get a refresher on 61-13 because they're referencing this a lot. A private pilot may act as pilot in command or serve as a required flight crew member of an aircraft without holding a medical certificate under Part 67 of this chapter, provided the pilot holds a valid U.S. driver's license and meets the requirements of 61-23 and complies with this section in all of the following conditions. All right, so that's just a quick refresher if you're wondering. and is seeking to act as pilot in command or serve as a required flight crew member under that section must have completed the process for obtaining an authorization for special issuance of a medical certificate for each of the following. So if you have one of these things, you have to complete the process for obtaining an authorization for special issuance of a medical certificate. If you have one of these things, once again. So a mental health disorder limited to an established medical history or a clinical diagnosis of a personality disorder that is severe enough to have repeatedly manifested itself by overt acts. A psychosis defined as a case in which an individual has manifested delusions, hallucinations, grossly bizarre or disorganized behavior, or other commonly accepted symptoms of psychosis, or may be reasonably be expected to manifest delusions, hallucinations, grossly bizarre or disorganized behavior, or other commonly accepted symptoms of psychosis. A bipolar disorder, or a substance dependency within the previous 2 years as defined in 67-307A4 of this chapter. A neurological disorder limited to an established medical history or clinical diagnosis of any of the following: epilepsy, disturbance of consciousness without satisfactory medical explanation of the cause, or a transient loss of control of nervous system functions without satisfactory medical explanation of the cause. A cardiovascular condition limited to a one-time special issuance for each diagnosis of the following: myocardial infarction, coronary heart disease that has required treatment, cardiac valve replacement, or heart replacement. And now we're getting into special rules for the conditions we just read through. So the special rule for cardiovascular condition: in the case of an individual with a cardiovascular condition, the process for obtaining an authorization for special issuance of a medical certificate shall be satisfied with the successful completion of an appropriate clinical evaluation without a mandatory wait period. Special rule for mental health conditions: in the case of an individual with a clinically diagnosed mental health condition, the ability to operate an aircraft under 61-113 of this chapter shall not apply if, in the judgment of the individual state licensed medical specialist, the condition renders the individual unable to safely perform the duties or exercise the airman privileges required to operate an aircraft under 61-113I of this chapter, or may reasonably be expected to make the individual unable to perform the duties or exercise the privileges required to operate an aircraft under 61-113 of this chapter, or the individual's driver's license is revoked by the issuing agency as a result of a clinically diagnosed mental health condition. Subject to paragraph C1 of this section, an individual clinically diagnosed with a mental health condition shall certify every 2 years in conjunction with the certification under 68-3B3 that the individual is under the care of a state licensed medical specialist for that mental health condition. The special rule for neurological conditions: in the case of an individual with a clinically diagnosed neurological condition, the ability to operate an aircraft under 61-113 of this chapter shall not apply if the judgment of the individual's state licensed medical specialist, the condition renders the individual unable to safely perform the duties or exercise the airman privileges required to operate an aircraft under 61-113I of this chapter, or may reasonably be expected to make the individual unable to perform the duties or exercise the privileges required to operate an aircraft under 61-113I of this chapter, or the individual's driver's license is revoked by the issuing agency as a result of a clinically diagnosed neurological condition. Subject to paragraph D1 of this section, an individual clinically diagnosed with a neurological condition shall certify every 2 years in conjunction with the certification under 68.3(b)(3) that the individual is under the care of a state licensed medical specialist for that neurological condition. Next we have 68.11, authority to require additional information. If the administrator receives credible or urgent information, including from the National Driver Registration or the Administrator's Safety Hotline, that reflects on an individual's ability to safely operate an aircraft under 61.113I of this chapter, the administrator may require the individual to provide additional information or history so that the administrator may determine whether the individual is safe to continue operating under that section. The administrator may use credible or urgent information received under paragraph A to request an individual to provide additional information or to take actions under 49 USC 44709B. So this section is saying if the administrator has reason to believe that something could happen because of your conditions, they can request additional information of your history so they can determine if you are safe to fly. So moving on, we have Part 830, which is notification and reporting of aircraft accidents or incidents and overdue aircraft and preservation of aircraft wreckage, mail, cargo, and records. Now it's important to remember this is part of Title 49. What we have been looking at recently is Title 14. Title 14 applies directly to pilots in the FAA, aeronautics and space. 830 and Title 49 is part of the NTSB. So I just wanted to point that out there. 831, applicability. This part contains rules pertaining to initial notification and later reporting of aircraft incidents and accidents and certain other occurrences in the operation of an aircraft wherever they occur when they involve civil aircraft of the United States, when they involve certain public aircraft as specified in this part, wherever they occur, and when they involve foreign civil aircraft where the events occur in the United States, its territories, or its possessions. Preservation of aircraft wreckage, mail, cargo, and records involving all civil and certain public aircraft accidents as specified in this part in the United States and its territories or possessions. 832. Definitions. So in this section, they're going to give some definitions to what they just described up here. As used in this part, the following words or phrases are defined as follow. An aircraft accident is defined as means an occurrence associated with the operation of an aircraft which takes place between the time any person boards the aircraft with the intention of flight and all such persons have disembarked, and in which any person suffers death or serious injury, or in which the aircraft receives substantial damage. For the purposes of this part, the definition of aircraft accident includes unmanned aircraft accident, as defined herein. Civil aircraft means any aircraft other than a public aircraft. Fatal injury means any injury which results in death within 30 days of the accident. So the death doesn't have to occur during the accident, it just has to happen within 30 days of the accident to be defined as a fatal injury. An incident means an occurrence other than an accident associated with the operation of an aircraft which affects or could affect the safety of operations. Means any person who causes, operator means any person who causes or authorizes the operation of aircraft such as the owner, lessee, or bailee of an aircraft. A public aircraft means an aircraft used only for the United States government or an aircraft owned and operated except for commercial purposes or exclusively leased for at least 90 continuous days by a government other than the United States government, including a state, the District of Columbia, a territory or possession of the United States, or a political subdivision of the government. Public aircraft does not include a government-owned aircraft transporting property for commercial purposes and does not include a government-owned aircraft transporting passengers other than commercial purposes. Crew members or other persons aboard the aircraft whose presence is required to perform or is associated with the performance of a governmental function such as firefighting, search and rescue, law enforcement, aeronautical research, or biological or geological resource management, or transporting, for other than commercial purposes, persons aboard the aircraft, if the aircraft is operated by the armed forces or an intelligence agency of the United States. Notwithstanding any limitation relating to the use of the aircraft for commercial purposes, an aircraft shall be considered to be a public aircraft without regard to whether it is operated by a unit of government on behalf of another unit of government pursuant to a cost reimbursement agreement if the unit of government on whose behalf the operation is conducted certifies to the administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration that the operation was necessary to respond to significant and imminent threat to life or property, including natural resources, and that no service by a private operator was reasonably available to meet the threat. Serious injury, I find this definition kind of funny, means any injury which requires hospitalization for more than 48 hours, commencing within 7 days from the date of the injury was received. Now that's understandable. Results in a fracture of any bone, except simple fractures of fingers, toes, or nose. That's starting to get a little crazy. Causes severe hemorrhages, nerve, muscle, or tendon damage. Involves any internal organ, or involves second or third degree burns, or any burns affecting more than 5% of the body surface. So I think 5, 4, 3, and 1 makes sense, but this section is saying you could break all 10 fingers, all 10 toes. You can break your nose. You can smash your face into the dash of the plane, and that doesn't count as a serious injury. So I just find that funny. Substantial damage means damage or failure which adversely affects the structural strength, performance, or flight characteristics of the aircraft, and which normally require major repair or replacement of the affected component. Engine failure or damage limited to an engine if only one engine fails or is damaged, bent fairings or cowling, dented skin, small punctured holes in the skin or fabric, ground damage to rotor or propeller blades, and damage to landing gear, wheels, tires, flaps, engine accessories, brakes, or wingtips are not considered substantial damage for the purpose of this part. Unmanned aircraft accident means an occurrence associated with the operation of any public or civil unmanned aircraft system that takes place between the time that the system is activated with the purpose of flight and the time that the system is deactivated at the conclusion of its mission, in which any person suffers death or serious injury, or the aircraft holds an airworthiness certificate and sustains substantial damage. So now we're moving on to notification of aircraft accidents, incidents, and overdue aircraft. Part 835, immediate notification. The operator of any civil aircraft or any public aircraft not operated by the armed forces or an intelligence agency of the United States or any foreign aircraft shall immediately and by the most expeditious means available notify the nearest National Transportation Safety Board office when an aircraft accident or any of the following listed serious incidents occur. So if these occur, you have to immediately notify the NTSB. flight control system malfunction or failure, inability of any required flight crew member to perform normal flight duties as a result of injury or illness, failure of any internal turbine engine component that results in the escape of debris other than out of the exhaust path in flight fire, aircraft collision in flight, damage to property other than the aircraft estimated to exceed $25,000 for repair, including materials and labor, or fair market value in the event of total loss, whichever is less. For large multi-engine aircraft, more than 12,500 pounds, maximum certificated takeoff weight. So this is when you have to notify the NTSB if you're flying a large multi-engine aircraft. In-flight failure of electrical systems, which requires the sustained use of an emergency bus powered by a backup source, such as a battery, auxiliary power unit, or air-driven generator to retain flight control or essential instruments. In-flight failure of hydraulic systems that result in sustained reliance on the sole remaining hydraulic or mechanical system for movement of flight control surfaces. Sustained loss of the power or thrust produced by two or more engines, and an evacuation of an aircraft in which an emergency egress system is utilized. Release of all or a portion of a propeller blade from an aircraft, excluding release caused solely by ground contact. A complete loss of information, excluding flickering, from more than 50% of an aircraft's cockpit displays known as electronic flight instrument system displays, engine indication and crew alerting system displays, electronic centralized aircraft monitor displays, or other displays of this type, which generally include a primary flight display, primary navigation display, and other integrated displays. Airborne Collision and Avoidance System (ACAS) resolution advisories issued when an aircraft is being operated on an instrument flight rules flight plan, and compliance with the advisory is necessary to avert a substantial risk of collision between two or more aircraft. Damage to helicopter tail or main rotor blades, including ground damage that requires major repair or replacement of the blades. Any event in which an operator, when operating an airplane as an air carrier at a public use airport or lands or departs on a taxiway, incorrect runway, or other area not designated as a runway, or experiences a runway incursion that requires the operator or the crew of another aircraft or vehicle to take immediate corrective action to avoid a collision. An aircraft is overdue and is believed to have been involved in an accident. So let's just recap there. All those things require immediate notification to the NTSB. Part 836, information to be given in a notification. So if there's an event where you have to immediately notify the NTSB, this is what has to be included in that notice. The notification required in 835 shall contain the following information if available: the type, nationality, and registration marks of the aircraft, name of owner and operator of the aircraft, name of the pilot in command, date and time of the accident, last point of departure and point of intended landing of the aircraft, positions of the aircraft with reference to some easily defined geographical point, number of persons aboard, number killed and number seriously injured, nature of the accident, the weather, and the extent of damage to the aircraft so far as known, and a description of any explosives, radioactive materials, or other dangerous articles carried. Subpart C is preservation of aircraft wreckage, mail, cargo, and records. 830.10 Preservation of aircraft wreckage, mail, cargo, and records. The operator of an aircraft involved in an accident or incident for which notification must be given, is responsible for preserving, to the extent possible, any aircraft wreckage, cargo, and mail aboard the aircraft, and all records including all recording mediums of flight, maintenance, and voice recorders pertaining to the operation and maintenance of the aircraft, and to the airmen until the board takes custody thereof, or a release is granted pursuant to 831.12b of this chapter. So this is saying you are responsible for protecting that aircraft wreckage, mail, cargo, and records until the board takes custody of that wreckage. Prior to the time the board or its authorized representative takes custody of aircraft wreckage, mail, or cargo, such wreckage, mail, or cargo may not be disturbed or moved except to the extent necessary. So, while you have custody of that wreckage, you cannot disturb that accident unless it is necessary to remove persons injured or trapped, to protect the wreckage from further damage, or to protect the public from injury. Where it is necessary to move aircraft wreckage, mail, or cargo, sketches, descriptive notes, and photographs shall be made, if possible, of the original positions and condition of the wreckage and any significant impact marks. So it's saying before you move it, you have to take descriptive notes. You also have to take photographs if possible. The operator of an aircraft involved in an accident or incident shall retain all records, reports, internal documents, and memoranda dealing with the accident or incident until authorized by the board to the contrary. Alright, moving on here. Reporting of aircraft accidents, incidents, and overdue aircraft. 830.15 is reports and statements to be filed. Reports. The operator of a civil, public, as specified in 835, or foreign aircraft shall file a report on board form 6120, OMB number 3147-0001, within 10 days after an accident, or after 7 days if an overdue aircraft is still missing. A report on an incident which immediate notification is required by 835 shall be filed only as requested by an authorized representative of the board. Crew member statement. Each crew member, if physically able at the time the report is submitted, shall attach a statement setting forth the facts, conditions, and circumstances relating to the accident or incident as they appear to him. If the crew member is incapacitated, he shall submit the statement as soon as he is physically able. Where to file the reports. The operator of an aircraft shall file any report with the field office of the board nearest the accident or incident. And that is going to do it for this video on part 68 and part 830. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.